welcome to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime, and it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? I mean, a drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard. Learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude.
Welcome. Today, I'm speaking with Misty Robinson. Misty is a Christian wife and stay-at-home homeschooling mom of 23 years. She's worked with teen girls and young ladies for 15 years as a Sunday school teacher. She desires to help ladies of all ages understand God's love and faithfulness through each stage and trial of life. She's faced many trials, which include losing a husband to cancer at age 24 and her mom to suicide 6 years ago. God has given her the great opportunity of becoming part of a growing nonprofit called HopeGateKeepers, which helps train others in ways to help people dealing with suicide. She says that together we can encourage each other through God's word and love. I am so excited to have you here with us today, Misty. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a privilege and honor.
Well, it's a privilege and honor for me. Every single time I get to share a story, I can't believe that God allows me to do this, because I don't think there's anything more special than someone trusting you with their life story. It's a beautiful thing. And as I talk about all the time, the fact that God allows us to use our stories as a way to share his goodness is just this great privilege. And the way he uses everything just amazes me. Even the bad things, the tough things, the traumatic things, he uses them for us to bridge over to other people who don't know him yet, or who are suffering and maybe losing hope. And for me, that is such a valuable thing for my life to be.
Yes, I had a girlfriend reach out to me this morning, and she actually was encouraging me, or just witnessed a blessing in my life and wanted to rejoice with me.
Mhm.
And a verse I gave her was Romans 8:28, and that's a verse that I think as Christians we often will voice or turn to, but it really is true that God does work all things together, and that is the good and the bad. And
Mhm.
so it's just amazing how you come to the other side of it and you can see how he worked it out. But such a
It
blessing.
is. It is. And what's really neat for me is I started this podcast during the pandemic. I was kind of closed in, taking care of my parents, my mom just turned 89 and my dad's 92. And I was missing that, being able to connect with people and share the gospel. And God kind of showed me this way that I could reach out and still be safe inside. And it's amazed me too, the people that I've gotten to meet all over the world. And you're one of those people that he connected me with. And you actually are fairly local. You're not that far away from me. And I know that these connections are more than just for a podcast episode. They're friendships. And I'm being connected to other people walking in their calling, listening to God, waiting on him, trying to be obedient. We can encourage each other, pray for and with each other. And I always tell people, once you're on my show, you're part of my podcast family. So, you're not getting rid of me.
It is amazing how we think the world is so big, but God has a way of connecting you with other believers, and even people that are just on their journey to get
Mhm.
to know him. And
Mhm.
just we each play a key part. It's just amazing.
It is. It's really beautiful. I always think of it kind of like someone's doing a painting, or there's like a symphony playing. It's art. These little details, and then these dark places and these bright places, and sometimes you don't really know where it's going, but when it's all finished, I think we're all going to probably see this beautiful portrait of Jesus.
Yes, my pastor uses this analogy of an embroidery artwork. We see the messy pieces, but
Hmm.
he's working a beautiful picture through all of it.
Yeah, somebody who needle points and does handwork, crochet and knitting and stuff. I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm not just like, oh, don't look under there, But yeah, that's such a great analogy. I love that. Now, on my podcast, I do things a little differently. I love to start at the beginning of our lives and then work up to what God is doing now, because I believe it helps us see that beautiful thread of Jesus, whether we knew him or not, whether we felt him or not, that he's there. And it's not that often that you get a chance to reflect back at, to the very beginning and really look and take a snapshot of what your life has been like. And I think it ends up being an encouragement, even, to us, with our own story, because we're so busy living, we don't really get a chance to do that. So I love that too, that this is a matter of really looking at the legacy that Jesus is offering us, and our families. And I love that I get to put this in a form that's tangible. Hopefully, that will stand the test of time. But that you can share with people that so they can hear more about how God worked in your life.
Exactly. I just love the I'm very I think it's very important to give words, to it's God's story. That's how I look at it. Is
Hmm.
I'm just the tool that he's using to share this part of his story. And just giving words to it. I'm very big with people communication. As I've gotten older, communication has just become so important to me. I've really trying to instill in my family communication brings healing.
Yeah,
And so I really feel that sharing your story, and like you said, we can even gain encouragement ourselves by
yeah.
sharing the story, because it does bring a healing to parts, like you said, we're so busy living that we didn't realize needed to be healed. So
Yeah,
it
absolutely. And if you're a journaler like I am, yeah, God works in large chunks of time. He's not limited to our Chronos time, right? He created our kind of time. He works in these larger chunks, and so sometimes we miss things. And he's constantly talking and moving, and we miss it. So when you journal things, or when you come back and recount your story, you can see things that you missed, and you get these presents, these blessings from God. There have been so many times in this process of pre-recording calls and actually recording, where either God has shown me something that I've been able to point out to someone that's a blessing, or they've seen it themselves. And so I think that aspect of it is really great as well. I always say journal, journal, journal. It's good to write it down, praise God for what he's done, and then go back later and look back, because you're going to find some new treasures.
definitely, like reading the Bible, you'll always find something different every time you read it.
Yeah, amen. It blows my mind. I think like, okay, I've been through the Bible like 16 times in straight through in various ways, and every single day he shows me something new, and I love it. It proves that it's living and active.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So let's get started. Let's go back. Will you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Okay, so I was born to two young teenagers. My mother was 18 and my father was 17, I believe, at the time. And as far as I know, they were high school, kind of high school sweethearts, or just they lived in the same small town, so kind of the same feel. Um, their, from what I know, their relationship at that time was kind of hard, um,
Hmm.
and they did not end up getting married. My mom, their relationship was, I believe. So one thing I do want to point out is my mom, and this I just feel like is important to say, because as I've gotten older and become a mom myself, I've gained such respect for her.
Hmm.
She had never made it a point to talk negative about my father in any way, to cause me to look at him in a negative way, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
So I did not meet my dad till I was 16. So that was very important that she did that for me, because when I did meet him, it left our relationship kind of open to whatever my current feelings would be, not a feeling of anything negative leading up to that.
Yeah, that's a powerful thing for her to do for you. That's a gift.
Anyways, so she ended up having to leave the relationship, and she had moved to California to live with her dad to kind of have a safe place to go. And I was born in Los Angeles, California, and over some time, within, I'm not sure the time frame, but she had decided to try one more time with my dad and went back to Colorado, and things hadn't changed, or just the relationship didn't work. So she ended up moving back to California, and I was raised there until I was 16. We lived from Los Angeles and all the way up to like San Francisco area. We moved frequently. My mom was a single mom. She did remarry. I think I was about probably 3, well, not remarry, but got married. I was around 3 years old to my stepdad, and he was a very loving man, very sweet. He had another daughter before me, but he treated me like his own and just was a great father. They ended up having 2 more children, my brothers, and it was, from what I can remember, a great, a childhood through those years. They did end up getting divorced. I'm not exactly sure how old I was at the time, but from that moment on, my mom was a single mom, and I kind of took over the motherly duties. She worked a lot, and I took over taking care of my 2 brothers, and just kind of became the mom. And so I would attend their parent conferences and their school plays. And
wow,
I probably, I attribute this to age, but I can't even remember off the top of my head how much older. I want to say I'm 6 years older than the one below me. So,
but I mean, wow, those are very adult things to be doing at that age. A lot of people have been through parental inversion for one reason or another, but how did that feel?
I look back and I just did everything that I wish was done for me.
Oh, that's powerful.
I didn't want them to feel the feelings that I had felt. And with that, throughout this conversation, I'm sure I will discuss ways ways I grew up, or things that I was, that I have gone through, and they may be connected to my mom, but never at any time did I look at even her in a negative light. I knew she struggled. I knew that she had hard times. And so there was never any anger or bitterness towards her, even now. And just this week, after we spoke the last time, I have gotten even more details as far as things that she dealt with in life. And
wow,
even this many years later. So as a young child, I knew the struggles that she faced. And so what I wanted to do for my brothers at that time was just give them as normal of a life as possible. And kind of, I know my mom's desire was just to kind of, if you say, break the cycles of her childhood and give us a good home. So I wanted to help her do that for my brothers.
Yeah, that's actually really beautiful. And I know all of our parents bring with them their own traumas, their own dysfunctions, their own things that they went through, and they do their best, and we do our best as well. But the fact that you cared so much for your brothers that you wanted to try to provide for them more than you had is a really beautiful thing.
Yes. So I would walk them to school, make their lunches, all those things. And what is such a blessing to me is I never really, boasted on doing those things for them, but I found out that throughout the years, my mom had written a journal in a Bible of all things.
Mm-hmm.
And in her journal, she describes those things to my brothers and what a blessing they were. And
Wow.
so it's a blessing for me to have that, to see that
Mm-hmm.
she saw and she appreciated. And
Yeah.
so I would do that for them, and take care of the home. My mom was very particular with things in the house, and so I wanted to make sure it was always perfect for her.
Mm-hmm.
On her time off of work, when she would have a day off, she needed fun time, girl to relax time. And I
Mm-hmm.
understood that too, as a single mom watching her work so hard. And she
Mm-hmm.
was a hard worker, a great employee. She was, I know, just a great worker. They would send her all over the place to train new employees, and just great things. So I knew she was doing a great job, and in my eyes, she deserved a break. So
Yeah.
she would go out with her girlfriends, and I would watch my brothers. And um, back then it seemed normal. Looking back, I can see some of the things that
Yeah.
God completely shielded me from at the time, which I'm thankful for. So
I mean, you were basically the other parent.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
which prepared me to be a mom now. So um,
Yeah, there's a good side to everything that happens if you choose to look at that.
right.
But it did rob you. She wasn't robbing you. There were choices you made, but it did rob you of some of being a child.
Yeah, as I've gotten older, I've looked back and said, in my marriage now, and my family would say I'm the more serious one. I've always been
Mm-hmm.
very serious, and I can see how that played a part. I was never really able to be the carefree,
Yeah.
um, and so, but that is, so through those years, and during that time, I probably was about, I want to say probably 12. One night we had a knock on our door, and it was first from some bus workers from the church, which I had no idea that there was a church in our area, or that people even knock doors, or what that was all about.
Right,
Um,
right.
but they were out inviting people, to church to ride the bus, and
Mm-hmm.
picking up kids or whoever wanted to get on the bus. And um, what was really funny, and I think I just need to add in to the story, is that when I was younger, my mom would, we would go through McDonald's drive-through, and maybe they forgot the ketchup. And my mom would say, Misty, she'd pull over and say, Misty, run in and get us some ketchup. And I was terrified. I was very, I would literally stand at the back of the McDonald's and be terrified to approach the counter and say anything.
Mm-hmm.
And she would just, get so frustrated with me because I was that way. And
Mm-hmm.
and so when these people came in and knocked on the door inviting us to church, I was the first one to say, yes, I want to go. Which,
Wow.
looking back, even
Yeah.
now talking about it, I'm like, that is just the Lord, because
Yeah. It was out of character. Yeah.
it definitely was. So she let me go. My brothers didn't want to go. I was the only one. Looking back, even at that, I'm amazed, with how the world is, that I'm thinking
Yeah.
she had no idea where I was going, who these people were, but
Right. Right.
thankfully she let me go.
Yeah. I
So,
found God's favor.
yes.
Um, yeah. Now, what was it like for you? What was church like? You had not been there before. What did you find when you got there?
I can just remember feeling love,
Mm,
safety, just the
mm,
people were so welcoming. And um, I can't, in my mind, I have tried to picture, I can't even remember. I'm still close with the pastor and his wife today,
mhm.
um, and have watched their church grow. I'm there in California. I'm now in New Jersey, but I
Yeah.
have watched their church grow, and I have gone back through pictures, and I can't remember visually what it looked like, but I just remember the feeling of love.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
so,
Isn't there a famous quote that says something to the extent of like, it's not about what you do for people, it's how you make them feel.
definitely.
Yeah.
And all these years later, as I said, I was 12 then, I'm 45 now. All these years later, it's still the same love from
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
It's
It's
just,
consistent.
And I will say, even my son now is he's finishing up Bible college here in New Jersey, and
Hmm.
one of the young men he's friends with, his mom just contacted me and said she rode the same buses from the same church when she was a
No
child.
way. That's
And
amazing.
so it is. God, like I
Yeah.
said, we think it's a big world, but God has a way of bringing it all together.
Yeah, you wouldn't even be able to do that nowadays, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. That's awesome. Now, there came a time where you felt called to go up to the altar, you got baptized, nobody else in your family was doing these things. How did they react to what was happening in your life?
Yeah. So I remember, um, when you don't, I've heard somebody say recently in talking about um, people that have a broken relationship with their father have a hard time having a relationship with God. And
Hmm.
I'm not sure about that with other people, but for myself, as I said, I didn't know my dad till I was 16. And
Hmm.
even that, I feel it was something that wasn't normal or good, I would say, for a child. But it's something I can be thankful for now because, again, it left open a relationship with the Lord, um,
Yeah,
without any issues.
yeah.
So they had the invitation, and I remember going down because just I can't tell you what the preaching was, but I can tell the feeling in my heart of needing to go and praying. And I remember, I don't know exactly. I probably went down every time as a young child, to be honest with you, just
I
because
know
of
adults that do. I know adults that do that. They raise their hand every
yeah,
time until
which
they because you don't understand in the beginning.
yeah. So
Yeah.
and I probably had gotten baptized many times. I remember going home and throughout the years, my mom and brothers making fun of me for going to
Mm,
church and making fun of me, saying, "Oh, you got baptized so many times," and just kind of mocking that. And
yeah.
again, we talk about God's favor. I never it never caused me to get angry or upset with them. I actually hurt for them. Even
Yeah.
as a young girl, I could just remember hurting for them that they would church to me was so loving and so innocent that they would
Yeah.
be so you know not that they were angry, but just have the feelings that they had about it.
Well, they didn't have the experiences you had, even if you tried to tell them about it.
Right.
You felt the love. You immediately felt the connection. And, how do you articulate that to another person?
Right. So I do remember my I was a homebody as a child. I would stay home, and I was content, to be honest. I was content playing with dolls and not playing with them, but setting up my Barbie house and stuff. Probably until I was like 14
Hmm.
um, and 15. I just liked being home. It was a safe. It was not as safe as I thought, but to me it was safe.
Yeah.
And so my mom, during my early teens, looking back, I mean, I have a daughter now that's 13, and I'm like, I can't believe she did that. It
Yeah.
now opens my eyes to how her thinking was not, I guess it's normal in the world, but to me it kind of scares me at that age, how she was mothering. But again, it was normal for her. So
Right.
um, as the early teen years, she would tell me, "Oh, you need to make friends. You need to have friends. You need to go out. You need to, um, you know, party and do what kids your age do." And um, just was not me. And I remember her one time she had a party in the home. She said
Hmm.
it was for me. I don't even remember who came. I don't know. I really can't remember any of it. I know that that's not what I wanted. I was, like I said,
Yeah.
just content. People were making fun of me for not drinking and not getting high with other people my age, and um, that time really sticks out to me because it was probably the first time that I stood up and just said, I don't need to do those things, and
Yeah.
kind of finally voiced to her that it wasn't something that I desired, and it wasn't, just to kind of let her know in the future, like, I don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah.
Um, so moving forward, I just continued to, did good in school. My mom, she, looking back, she loved the way she knew how to love. And so she never really said, I love you. She was not affectionate. And
Hmm.
so in my heart, I felt I had to earn her love. And so doing good in school was the way that I did that. When I would bring home good grades, I would hear, I love you. I'm so proud of you.
Mm.
And so and also throughout the years, she would say, oh, you're going to be the first one to graduate, in so many generations, or whatever. And, she was so excited. And I remember her telling people, and it made me feel good that she was so proud of me.
Hmm.
So I did well in school. Now, I did mention, I would go to my brother's conferences and do those things. And even throughout my teen years, my mom was not involved in my things. Um, and that's kind of sad. I just saw this morning one of my cousins shared a picture of their daughter's Christmas concert, and her daughter, she shared a picture, and her daughter is looking back at her smiling. So
No.
she picked her mom out of the crowd,
Yeah.
and it hit me like I didn't have that, and so
Yeah.
um that was something that was kind of hurtful, but I believe it made me who I am today. I'm a mom who always wants to be there, and it's probably
Yeah.
not good for my kids, but I want to be there. But so I graduated with honors. I got a scholarship, and that's even where God the scholarship was to Berkeley in California, and
Hmm.
a great college if you're going that route. But looking back, I'm so thankful that I didn't follow through with that. I believe it would have totally taken me a totally different way in life. Um,
Hmm.
and so um, I graduated. My mom wasn't even at my graduation, which did not
Wow.
hit me until a year or two later, when I said, I was thinking, she was so excited for me to graduate, and yet she wasn't even at my graduation.
Wow. That is, can we just put a pin there for one moment? Like, I'm hearing as you're recounting, this, even though she was doing her best, there's this sense of rejection to some point of certain things that she chose or didn't choose to do. Did you feel compensated, if you look back, by God's chosenness, like that God chose you and he did show up for everything, or were you not aware of that at that time?
At that time, I
I
don't
know it's a
think,
big question,
yeah,
but yeah,
I I think at that time I
yeah.
didn't realize that. And that's why I say, like when
Hmm.
I brought up Romans 8:28,
Hmm.
during a lot of those times, I didn't realize it. It wasn't
Yeah.
until I got older and really became maybe it wasn't until I started seeing God use my story or use my life that I was able to see his hand on my life throughout every part.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The more that we really look at what actually happened, the more we're able to see where he was and how he was filling in the places where we needed some filling in. I find it interesting in pretty much every story of anyone I've ever talked to, if there are things that are missing organically from your family here on earth, God fills it in with his own presence, but he also fills it in with people from the church, from his body.
Definitely. And it's even amazing to see him fill it in with people that don't know God, because um,
Hmm.
looking back, I can see and my graduation was, I do want to touch on this, go back.
Hmm.
I totally believe
Yep.
that this is why I have the life I have. My dad's mom, I did leave this out. She is a, a wonderful, godly lady.
Hmm.
One of the most godliest women that I know. And I am the first grandchild. I'm the oldest of 18 from my father's side, and
Wow.
she so there's a huge family, but I was the first grandchild, I will proudly say. And and I know that my grandmother was and continues to be a praying woman, and I tell her, if not every day, very, very frequently, how thankful I am, because I know that throughout the time of my mom and dad even being a couple as teenagers, that she was praying even then. And I
Yeah.
know that when I was conceived and being raised, I know that she prayed for me. And I didn't meet her either until I was 16. But just that I know, has always prayed for me. And I really believe that the life that I have now is due to her prayers. And as I've gotten older, it has just proven how important prayer is, and how
Hmm.
my prayer should be the same, for my loved ones. And um,
Absolutely. Could you tell us, there was a major shift in what was going on in your life. You had told me about an argument that had turned into what
yes.
was abuse with your mom and I guess your stepdad, and you stepped in to defend her. And
Yes.
then, could you tell us a little about that?
Okay. So, um, throughout the years, my mom had, at one point, we were homeless, and it was just due to some issues with my mom and her employer. There was a lawsuit involved, and so they had fired her. It was messy, and so we ended up being homeless. And a neighbor who we didn't really know took us in and opened a room up for us. And so we were living there for a short amount of time. And during that time, as I said, my mom would take whatever time and go out with her friends and whatever when she needed breaks. And
Hmm.
there was one weekend that she said she was going to Vegas with some friends. And when she came back, um, and again being covered by the Lord, I don't even remember that weekend. She was gone, and we were staying with a neighbor we didn't know.
Hmm.
I can't even look back and see how that went. But when she came back, she was married. She had
Wow.
married. Yeah, it was crazy, a crazy time. We didn't know this guy. I
Yeah.
remember questioning her because, I always watched for my mom's safety even as a child.
Hmm.
There were times she would come home, again, not in a negative way towards my mom. I loved her, but she would come home drunk, and I would, bring her to the bathroom and care for her through the night to make sure she was safe. And
Mm.
um, but so that, there were just times in her life that I know that was her way of escape, I think, looking
Hmm.
back. And so she came home from Vegas married to this man we didn't know. I do remember questioning her, like, I felt, looking back, probably as a mom, saying, "What did you do? Who was this
Yeah.
guy? We don't even know him."
Yeah.
And she said that she had known him for years. I don't remember ever seeing him,
Uh-huh.
but so we ended up moving in with him and his mom. Um, and they had a beautiful home.
Hmm.
But even there was, and I don't mean this negative towards anybody, but even as a young girl, I saw a flag of, okay, this guy lives with his mom. How,
Yeah.
how, how is he going to take care of you?
Right.
Because my goal was always for my mom to be taken care of. So we moved in with them, and his mom's health started to deteriorate, and my
Hmm.
mom helped her. Um, Kind of became like a hospice nurse, really. My mom did that for many people throughout the years, took care of them till their end.
Okay.
She did end up passing. And so now we had the home and her husband, and he became, I don't know if he was before. I do remember being a snoop. I often snooped through my mom's things just to make sure she was, I don't know. I just kind of wanted to make sure I was the mom, make sure she
Yeah.
was doing right. And I remember one time early in their relationship, I had found some drugs. And
Hmm.
again, mom, I questioned, and I think at that time she kind of put me in my place that I was the child and she was the mom, and that was the end of that. But so, um, so then things started to change. Maybe they didn't change. Maybe they just became more visible to me.
Yeah.
Um, he started, he would pull the spark plugs out of the car so that we couldn't leave. Um,
Mm.
he would be coming home. It was just me and my mom coming home from the grocery store. And I remember he was in his robe standing at the garage door outside. And when we pulled up, he just started pulling groceries out and throwing them out against the door. And I
Oh.
remember because the eggs broke, and I just,
Mm-hmm.
it scared me. It kind of shocked me. And I just would watch my mom's reaction. And my mom was a very strong woman, very independent growing up.
Mm-hmm.
She had to be. And so watching her reactions and not standing up for herself and not being vocal and strong anymore, um, started to alarm me because it wasn't her. That wasn't her normal reaction. And
Yeah.
so there was one night, I don't know, no, maybe it was that same night, she did finally start to um stand up, and maybe I think maybe that it was the same night, and I became vocal for her because
Mm-hmm.
it just hurt me so much that she was tolerating that. And so her husband had said something to me that I responded with, "You're not my dad."
Mm-hmm.
And I never, as I said, I tried to make my mom's life as easy as possible, and I knew um, those that was a disrespectful response for me. And as the words left my mouth, I just kind of cringed because
Mm-hmm.
it was just not me and it was not respectful. And at that time, he sent her to her room, which looking back, there were frequent times I believe he quote unquote punished her by making her go to her room.
Mm.
Um, I just felt so bad because not only was I disrespectful, and then I caused more problems for her, which my
Mm-hmm.
whole life was trying to make her life easier. Um, and so I don't remember his response except sending her to her room and them leaving my room. And
Yeah.
after that, it just really was eye-opening for me.
Yeah.
I um I don't remember. I say I climbed out my window. I'm not sure if maybe there was a door in my room. There's so much in my life that is blank, and I just really believe that's just the Lord. Um,
Yeah. I honestly, I think, we are blessed by loss of memory and certain traumas and certain things. I one time was kind of talking to God about some things that had happened in my life, and I felt like He said, "Hey, I allowed you not to remember that. It's too painful." Yeah, I know the generality of it, but
mhm.
I don't know the details. And I agree with you. I think that's in a way Lord's favor. I know my daughter's a psychotherapist. I know there are actual reasons psychologically why, but I believe that those reasons stem from God's grace.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I was speaking with one of my mom's cousins this week,
Mhm.
and I knew that there was some sexual abuse in my mom's family, and
Mhm.
um, we were just discussing that, the loss of memory, and
Mhm.
I was sharing with her that my mom's friend, who has since passed as well, had shared with me my mom discussing me being sexually abused as a child.
Mhm.
Um, and so she had brought it up with me years ago, just how I was, what happened. And I have no recollection of it. So
Mhm.
I,
Yeah.
I'm thankful for that, because
Yeah.
I feel it hasn't affected me. And so,
Mhm.
um, but yeah, so after that, I had gone out to our backyard at the time, and I remember sitting by the pool, and that at that moment, I remember crying and being so broken for my mom and so upset with myself for, being disrespectful. And
Mhm.
um but I know the Lord understood my heart as far as I never want to excuse disrespectfulness, especially having my own children, but
Yeah,
I really,
but like, can we stop for 1 second? Somebody needs to be worthy of respect to be respected, though.
yes, yes.
Okay,
Um,
so if you were disrespectful to someone who really wasn't acting in a manner to deserve respect, I think it was more that you were wanting to stay consistently good and you wanted to keep your mom safe. But I don't think disrespecting someone who's abusing your mom is a bad thing.
mm, right,
Yeah.
right. So, I just remember, crying to the Lord and telling him that I didn't want that life. I couldn't live that life. And
Yeah.
um, I think at that moment, I just came to the realization that my mom's choices didn't have to be my choices,
Hmm.
and that I could make my own choices then, for my future. And I remember just telling the Lord that I wanted a different life, and that um, I don't remember word for word, but I gave up full surrender of my life and my future, and just told the Lord whatever He wanted to do, I'd be willing. And I say, I know as a child, I believe that I did accept salvation as a child,
Hmm.
just because I know my heart, and I know when I would go down to the altar, I know that it was sincere. But
Hmm.
this time in the backyard is where I always point to, knowing for sure of when, just
Yes.
have reassurance,
Yes.
because that is when I can see the change happen in my life. And so
That,
throughout the years, I'm sorry.
that nothing. I was just going to say that's awesome that you can. Not everyone can point to a time, but it is really helpful when you know, hey, that's the time where I really said, "Here's my entire heart."
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, throughout the years, started to get overwhelmed or tired, in life, she would threaten me and my two brothers to send us away to live with our dads.
Hmm.
And their dad had moved to Mexico. That's where his family was from. And my dad, as I mentioned, was in Colorado. And,
Hmm.
my dad had gotten married and had 15 other children. And I never, I do have letters from when I was a child, so he obviously was in contact with my mom, but we
Hmm.
didn't have a relationship at all. So it was scary for me when she would say that, that oh, I'm going to send you guys to live with your parents. I never wanted to go because she was my world, and my
Right.
mom was my safe place. And so, but that night when I told the Lord, I just wanted his hand on my life.
Hmm.
And so, the next morning, my mom was driving me to school, and she brought up what had happened the night before. And I don't remember her being angry with me, but I do remember her bringing up sending me to live with my dad again. And at that moment, I remember such a boldness. And I remember saying, okay, that's fine. And I think it shocked her,
Yeah.
but it didn't scare me that time, which it really was eye-opening for me because that wasn't
Yeah.
normally who I was. And I remember walking into my high school and, going straight to my counselor's office and asking to use the phone and calling my dad and telling him, I want to come live with you.
Hmm.
And again, one of those times, I don't remember the flight there. I don't remember packing. I don't remember any of it. But I did go live with my dad. It was the summer, actually. I believe it was the summer between my 15, the year of me being 15, turning 16.
Hmm.
Because I do have pictures of celebrating my 16th birthday with my dad. So um, I had moved to live with him and his family, and Um, it was it was a change. I went from being mom to and not having a dad
Hmm.
to a lifestyle in my mom's home was you could do whatever you want. There was there were rules, but not really rules. And
Hmm.
so living with my dad was very different. I ended up wanting to leave at 18. And my mom, this is just where the Lord again, just has a place in every part of my life. My mom had grown up in Colorado, and so she had friends there, and I didn't know them because I grew up in California. But when I did move out there, I was introduced to one of her best friends,
Mm-hmm.
Susie, and which also had a daughter my same age. And so we became her daughter and I became great friends because our moms were friends, and so that was just great. Well, the day I turned 18, they had come to pick me up from my dad's, and it was just I feel God protecting me from maybe, not that I made every right decision in my past or currently or will in my future,
Mm-hmm.
but I looking back, I feel it was like the Lord protecting me from making wrong decisions.
Mm.
Um, he had this open door for me. This Susie, her name was, had come to pick me up and give me a safe place in her home
Yeah.
to move into. There's a lot of I say children, they're 18, but there's a lot of children, young adults that want to leave for some reason and they don't have a place to go. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm so thankful for that time that she was there to welcome me into her home. So I stayed
Mm-hmm.
with them for some time, and then I had to leave their home as well due to whatever their family situation was.
Yeah.
And um, from there, I ended up living with some people that I had known. At the time, I probably considered them friends. Looking back, I really didn't know them very well at all, which is scary to me. And it really was just the Lord again protect me during this time. I remember it's not even finished. They had a couch and a table down there, and I would sleep on the couch. Um, and then during that time, I had found out they were like taking my information. They had opened like phones in my name, and oh, it was just a mess. And
Oh.
I was young. I didn't understand too much about safety and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
identity, any of that stuff. So I knew right away if they would do that, I just couldn't trust them. So I had a friend uh, through Susie's daughter, who had taken me in before, and I was able to stay at their home. And I actually slept. I really was just there just to sleep, and I slept in a walk-in closet. Um, it was my way of staying out of their way.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and they never made me feel like I was in the way, but I just felt like that's just where I should go. And so during that time, I got a job at the local grocery store, and quickly, it just, that again was God, quickly worked my way from being a cashier to being
Mm-hmm.
the whole a manager for the front end of the store. And at 18 years old, I thought, wow, this is great. I knew as at that age to have a decent paying job
Mm-hmm.
and health benefits was important. Um,
Yeah.
and so that
I
job,
love the favor that God kept giving you. I mean, you got the job, you were able to eventually get your own apartment. You were already used to making a lot of decisions and being responsible and knowing how to do all the things that an adult does from the time when you were taking care of your brothers. And at 19, you ended up meeting your husband, which I think is amazing. I know your parents met when they were young as well, but you were such an old soul at that point. I feel like you were way older than 19 internally. Um, y'all met each other and got married, and it sounded like when we were talking, just he was the perfect person. You had this really great relationship. Um, and then you shared with me what happened when he was 24. Could you tell us about that?
yes. So we were married and had two children. My daughter was 2 at the time, and my son was 4 months old. And
Oh,
it was New Year's Day. He woke up and was just having like sharp stomach pains, and I thought maybe it was appendicitis, maybe just
hmm
something he ate or something. And So, you do all the tests. I'm like, okay, hop on one foot, do all these things, whatever. And so nothing would help his pain. And we were in Colorado, and it just was a very bad snowstorm, which you love if you're not working, you're home, beautiful snow.
Hmm.
And but his pain wouldn't stop. And I remember my son was 4 months old, and I was taking care of the babies, and I remember um I didn't have anybody to watch them or keep them to take them. So I called my brother and I said, I need you to get him to the hospital. And so I called his sister. His sister lived right across the street. And I'm not sure, I don't remember exactly. I want to say it was my brother, but one of them, anyways, took him to the hospital, to the emergency room. And they were there for some time, just checking in and keeping me updated. And then one of them called and said I needed to get to the hospital. And I believe my sister-in-law came over to stay with the babies. And I remember going in, and they said, the doctor said, we're going to send him for some ultrasounds,
Mm.
um, and then I'll come back and we'll go over the results and everything. So I went with him to the ultrasound room, and I was a mom, so I knew
Yeah.
ultrasounds, I knew how they did them. And I remember, when you're going in, when you're going to have a baby, and you kind of watch for a reaction from the nurse, because
Hmm.
they,
Right. Yeah.
and so when she was a young nurse, and when she was doing his ultrasound, I was watching her face just to see any reactions. And they can't tell you anything, only the doctor can. So I just wanted a glimpse of what she thought, maybe. And she didn't give any reaction. And I remember her walking around this wall, and I could see there was a picture. Oh, it was hung just right to where I could see her reflection behind the wall.
Hmm.
And I saw her wiping tears away. And just then I knew that it wasn't a good thing. Um, and so we were in triage still at that point. And we went back to triage, and the doctor eventually came in and diagnosed him with stage 4 cancer.
Mm.
And it was definitely a hard thing. And so I just remember both of us just kind of just taking it in.
Hmm.
And looking back, it was a hard time, but a sweet time of just,
Yeah.
if you want to say resting in the Lord, it was just kind of like that exhale of just, okay. And so because he was only 20, I was 24, he was 26.
Hmm.
He was so young, they wanted to know where this cancer had originated. That became the next big deal. Where did this start? Where
Hmm.
is it? Where Find all the cancer.
Hmm.
Um, they obviously had found a lot to diagnose him at stage 4. But so after that became a lot of tests, a lot of different appointments to find out where it originated from. And people say, God winks, when God does little things here and there. During this time, his mom had wanted him to go straight, clean diet, everything organic, everything, to help the cancer, help healing,
Hmm.
maybe even cure him. Um, I wasn't resolved to the fact, like, okay, it's done, he's dying. But I was more, if people know me now, they know I'm a take charge kind of person. Um,
Hmm.
but at that time, I was just very God's in control type of
Yeah.
person.
God gave
Um,
you some peace.
it was. And so I
Yeah.
remember his mom, very loving, and as a mom I understand, but she was very, controlling of what he ate, and just, she was fighting for him. And
Hmm.
so but he loved Taco Bell. And he would have me sneak him to Taco Bell. And I remember, as we're in our early 20s, 2 kids of our own, and we're sneaking to Taco Bell, hiding out in the car. And the God wink here is, somebody just told me just the other day they brought back the Mexican pizza at Taco Bell, which was his favorite. So um,
Hmm.
it's funny. But So my thought was, whether he's dying, if he's dying, and they said it was terminal and there was no cure.
Mhm.
Really what they were doing was, now with the test, was studying him to find
Yeah.
out, details. And he had become content. He had the peace of God. And I know that's what gave me the peace of God. Um,
Mhm.
he was always a very relaxed man. Unfortunately, I would pick fights with him before the cancer. I just
Uh-huh.
like to rile him up because he was always such a relaxed person. Um, God knew that. God that's the way he would need to be with this diagnosis.
Mhm.
And so that was his personality. And it was 1 month later that he passed. Um,
Wow.
they never did find out where his cancer originated from. Nobody in his family had had cancer. So there was really no genetic link to the cancer.
Mhm.
Um, Something my mother-in-law said years later. I am remarried now and had 3 more children. Um, and my first husband, was a great man of God, but he was young, and
Yeah.
he was still finding his way in the Lord, and with, in my mother-in-law's terms, in standards and rule, convictions, and things like that, and things that you would need or would want to be, as a parent. He was still finding his way in that. And my
Mhm.
mother-in-law, I think it did take her some time to adjust to me being remarried, and he was her baby, and so I understand that. But she eventually had said to my current husband, she said she did see God's hand in all of it, that my current husband, would be what my children needed spiritually.
Mhm. That's
And
beautiful for her to be able to get to that place.
it is. So,
Yeah.
again, seeing God in all of it. So, my husband passed away, and we were young. We didn't think, we couldn't afford life insurance. So, looking back, that was not wise. I always tell everybody, get life insurance. You just never know. God
Mhm.
says,
Mhm.
life is a vapor. You're not promised tomorrow. And so, I went from being a stay-at-home mom to now trying to figure out how I was going to take care of 2 children on my own, without a job or anything financially, saved or anything. And his boss was a great man, and his fellow employees were amazing. They actually, sold some of their vacation time back to their employer, or whatever time that they wanted to sell back. I'm not sure how he worked it out, but his boss worked it out that, they wanted to donate to the family, to me and my kids, uh,
Wow.
to help, and that was such a blessing, because we had nothing saved. We were young, living check to check, and
Mhm.
God always provided. But so, to be honest, I don't remember even being afraid of how God was going to provide, because he was providing in real time. And
Yeah.
even through, like, for the funeral and everything, our church that, my husband actually grew up in, they had given an offering to pay for all the services, and even a little towards the family, and getting on my feet and everything. But I remember even that, being it was hard for me to accept that from the church, because to me the church was for to help people in need, and I wasn't as needy as other people. So I had to get a computer, which I never had, and, started trying to set that all up to do, papers and things. And I came across chat rooms on Yahoo. Well, in church, we had heard, the preacher had touched on, there's bad things on there, or maybe I had heard it somewhere in church. And so I thought, oh, I'm not supposed to look at that stuff, or there's bad things there, or whatever. And I had noticed Christian chat rooms. And
Mhm.
so I thought, oh, it's Christian, it's safe. So, uh, yeah. So I went on there and I had seen these two people debating, and the Christian was debating, or the atheist was debating with the Christian, or so on. And so the Christian had mentioned a verse, but didn't know the reference, and I knew the reference, so I went ahead and typed it in there, and the rest is kind of history. That person, that Christian, ended up that Christian ended up being my current husband. He wanted to come visit me to meet me and the family, and I was hesitant. I had friends, sharing scary stories, telling me, what he could be, and so I was
Hmm.
hesitant. He did call me one day and told me what the price of the flight was and to pray about it. And he was trying to see if I'd be willing this one more time to let him visit. And
Hmm.
later on, I remember him calling me, telling me that his boss had called him into his office, which, doesn't happen unless you're in trouble, I guess, or something. And the
Hmm.
boss had told him he had a bonus for him, and it was in the exact amount of the flight ticket.
Wow.
And so to him, it was peace that he should come visit me.
Hmm.
So he came, and we, different trips back and forth to each other's homes, and
Hmm.
all. We ended up um, getting married in February of the following year. And it's just, there's so much in there, still even so much in there where the Lord worked out.
Oh,
But
I'm sure. Wow, that's amazing. I mean, first of all, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I'm so sorry for your loss. But how amazing that God took you through it in peace and provision. And then, here he provides for you another husband. I mean, you guys, you have 5 kids, all raised in the church. You've taught teen and women's ministries. I mean, your life is such a reflection of the overflow and love and goodness of God.
it definitely is. And you talked about journaling, and I think it's so important. You know, even having that life and looking back and seeing God, it's very easy in being busy in life to still get discouraged at times just with the smallest things. And
Hmm.
I always remind people to look back and see what God has done in the past. Um,
Hmm.
and I have to remind myself, even, God definitely has been in my life, even when I didn't know. And he's still there, and it's this, his story isn't done. And
Yeah.
so, yes, it's just so important.
It's funny because we really, I love that you say his story isn't done. We're in this chapter right now, and none of us likes to wait. And none of us really can see what he's doing in the big picture sometimes. So, I just this morning was looking at the word trust as a verb. And it was funny because the way that they wrote it out in the definition, um, using trust as a verb, when you got to the end, the last thing they had was for the definition was believe. And I thought about, if it's a verb, it's this active believing, it's this waiting in active faith. And literally, when God says, be still and know that I am God, that translates, that be still there, when I've looked it up, translates to active waiting. And so when our focus is on God and when we know him in relationship, if we're able to stay looking at him, like the things that he does for us as we're actively believing in who he is, like the world could never have that kind of hope or that kind of peace.
Yes. It's that actually is one of my favorite verses. Be still and know that I'm God, because that is always, it's giving up your own control and just, as you said,
Yes.
trusting in God's control of it all. Um, Again, another reminder we all need. And so, yeah, so I have been blessed to be able to work with teen girls and
Hmm.
young women now, for many years. And in my pastor's words, I have a lot of life experience,
Mm-hmm.
which it's not any experience that I would have chosen, but I definitely want it all to be used for God. One of my life verses now is, I will gladly spend and be spent for you. And
Amen.
I want my life, every bit of it, to be used for the Lord. And so,
Mm-hmm.
um, when, probably about 6 years ago, about 7 years ago, I began um, embarking on a running journey
Mm-hmm.
and getting healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was running and running for Ainsley's Angels, and they are a organization that pushes handicapped children or adults in chairs in marathons, half marathons, and such.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to help in that way. So I was running. It kind of, to me, was two ways. I was getting healthy, feeling good, um, and able to help other people. I've noticed about myself, I have a hard time doing for myself unless it benefits somebody else as well. um, and and so I was doing that, and at the same time I was making my mom proud. She
Mm-hmm.
became one of my biggest cheerleaders, and one of the people in the organization who runs some of the races was in Wyoming, where my mom was living at the time. And I remember my mom tracking them down to say, my daughter runs with you. And it was just the greatest feeling for me at that time,
Mm-hmm.
that she was so proud. And my daughter had started running with me, helping me push the chair, and it was just great. Um, and then, so one day during one of my training runs, I was on my treadmill, and I had had a girlfriend who had just recently passed to cancer. And, as we spoke, cancer was something that's always close to my heart. And
Mm-hmm.
she left behind 7 children. And it was a time of re-examination for myself of my life and my family and what I was doing with myself. And I was having a conversation with the Lord, saying, Lord, I've been fully surrendered. I'm surrendered my life, just as my friend was, whatever you want to do with my life,
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing, recommitted, just everything. And so I remember him bringing to light the one thing that I never ever surrendered. And I remember
Mm.
stopping my treadmill. I am someone, even as a little girl, I could never change the channel if there was a man preaching on TV, I could not change the channel. I was always convicted. So I've always been somebody, when the Lord tells me to do something, I have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I stopped my treadmill, and I just knelt right there by my treadmill, and I surrendered that one thing, and that was my mom.
Mm.
I had spent even my adult years calling my mom every day, making sure she was safe, texting her, telling her, just text me when you get home from the bar, or whatever, wherever she was, so I would know that she was safe. I was still being mom so many years later.
Do you hear in your story that back where you were out by the pool and you had just had that encounter, and you told me that that was the time of your full surrender to Jesus,
Hmm.
and it was during a time where you were standing up for your mom and going through all that, and then now God was like, well, wait a minute, you have fully surrendered everything but her.
Yes.
So I love that he still was so patient with you all that time,
Yes.
but he was saying you don't need to carry that anymore.
Yeah,
That's beautiful.
it is. And it's beautiful and sad to me at the same time, because
Yeah.
I still see, even though I was adult, I was still a child carrying that burden for my mom so many years.
Yeah.
Even with her as an adult saying, Misty, you're stop. I'm an
Yeah.
adult,
Yeah.
um, I surrendered her to the Lord, and that was very hard for me, because I don't know why. I know now, God doesn't need our help,
Hmm.
My
Yeah.
help and caring for my mom was never needed, and he he could handle it himself. And
Hmm.
um so I don't remember when that was, the time of me surrendering her to him. But in July, I know it was her following birthday. I received, actually on her birthday, we had called and sang happy birthday to her. um, Within that time frame, I believe I visited her, and we had probably the best visit we ever had, where I felt like daughter and mom. Um,
Wow.
we would go into the shops and she would say, "Oh, here's my daughter." It just was a sweet, sweet time. And I know now, again, looking back, the Lord He gave me that time with her.
Hmm.
Um, and it was just a sweet mother-daughter time that neither one of us had ever experienced it that way. And so, her following birthday, my kids, I had, we called her and sang happy birthday, had a great talk. And um, I would often call my brothers and say, "Oh, don't forget it's mom's birthday." And, but she knew that I did that. And she made me promise her not to this time. She
Okay.
would, she would tell me not to do it before, but I always did, because I never wanted them to forget her. And so, but this time it was just different. She made me promise to not tell them to call her. And so I didn't.
Hmm.
And, I guess it was her way of seeing if they would call on their own. And the next morning, I was driving my daughter to work and I got a phone call that my mom had passed away.
Oh
Um,
no.
Previously, before that, months before, she had called me, talking about some feelings she was getting from being on this medication.
Hmm.
I don't know why she was on medication. I don't know what she had gone to the doctors for. This is something I'm looking into trying to change in the future somehow, but she had told me that the medication was giving her these thoughts, and throughout the years as a young girl, I remember her. I do remember her saying um, things about, "Oh, I would never hurt myself. I love you kids too much. I would never do that. I promise." And I remember those things when I was a kid. I don't remember the
Hmm.
context all around it, but so the same thing came up in our conversation. She had said, "It's giving me these thoughts. I'm just going to stop the medication because I don't like how it's making me feel, and I would never do that." And whatever. And so when I got the call that she had passed away, I have, dealt with close ones in death before. So I told my grandfather, "Let me speak to the coroner. I want to talk to the coroner," because
Hmm.
I wanted to know the details. And, when people, I know my grandpa, when they're in shock, they're not going to be able to relay the details. And so,
Hmm.
the coroner got on the phone and he discussed, her room and the way things were set and things. And I had talked with him about my conversation with her, and he agreed with me that it was suicide.
Yeah.
Um, which it wasn't shock. I mean, it, it wasn't shocking because I had knew her struggles, but it
Yeah.
was shocking because that was my mom. Um,
Of course. I'm so sorry for your loss. I mean, I do want to point out, and I think we talked about this during the pre-recording call, that God had you fully surrender her first, and I think that that was probably his greatest gift to you.
yes, definitely. And that's why I like to talk about that, is because without that surrender, I think the
Mm.
pain would have been so much worse.
Yeah.
And the pain continues even to today, but there's a peace in it because it wasn't even even without control, but knowing that I entrusted her to God was the
Hmm.
best gift he could give me.
Yeah.
And even through that, I'm very clear to tell people, God is such a big God, and there are many people who have attempted suicide that have come through.
Hmm.
Um, and so even, people are left with questions, and it's understandable when they have a loved one that dies from suicide,
Yeah.
the whys and the what ifs. And even with my husband with cancer, I never questioned why. I didn't think
Yeah.
it was, I know it's not wrong to question God. He knows our hearts, he knows our concerns, our questions already. Um,
Yeah.
my question with my husband was, why would you give me two kids if you knew that I wasn't going to have a husband? But he
Hmm.
answered that he gave me another husband.
That's
Um,
true. Yeah.
and I never questioned with my mom, because God is such a big God, and many people have attempted and have made it through. And my God was able to have her make it through if that was His will.
Hmm.
Um, and she didn't. And it was a bittersweet moment. It was a moment of being sad that I lost my mom, to suicide, but it
Hmm.
was a relief of not having to worry about her anymore.
Yeah, I can completely hear that. And again, I'm so sorry you've had a lot of loss, but you've had also a lot of provision from God. And you and I talked about your possibly wanting to write a book in the future, and we also talked about gatekeepers, which I mentioned in the beginning of uh, your biography. If you could just tell us a little bit about what you were asked to do with them and what your thoughts are about the future, that would be great.
Yes. So right now I am currently writing. Um, I say it's his story,
Hmm.
um, but through a child's eyes. So my name on Instagram and Facebook is One Child's Eyes, because my story, I feel when I share it, is through, not only the eyes of a child who grew up the way I grew up, but through a child of God's eyes,
Hmm.
seeing it through the Lord's vision of what, just His story written out. Um,
Hmm.
and so I've shared my testimony at different times. The Lord's opened doors for me to share at different churches, ladies' meetings, and such. And I've had many women tell me I should write a book. Even
Hmm.
ladies who have written their own books, and none of us think that our story is that important. But again, this is coming back to, it's God's story, and um, if it helps one person,
That's
to
right.
know that they're not alone, that they can make it through the hardest of struggles.
Hmm.
um, After I lost my mom, I went into a very bad anxiety, and my husband, and talking to him, I would tell him, it's very lonely if you think you're the only person dealing with it. And
Hmm.
even in church, you can feel like you're the only person because people don't like to share their problems, right? We don't
Hmm.
we don't need to know every detail, but it is nice to know that you're not the only one struggling.
Yeah.
And so thankfully the Lord brought me through that anxiety and such. And so my husband had said, misery loves company, and he wasn't saying it in a negative way, but it is true. It does help us to know we're not the only one. So I am writing. I just I'm writing and just seeing where God wants to take that. I would love one day for it to be published and hopefully get into the hand of maybe another young girl,
Hmm.
that is struggling, or a woman my age now that,
Yeah.
I have even dealt with having a prodigal. And so the story is not over. The story is
No.
not over, and God's still working, and God's still providing. But one day, Lord willing, there will be a book. And again, it's not I my name will be on it, but it will be all about the Lord. Um, and
It's
so
funny, I never told you this, but the very first book that I wrote, I ended up not trying to publish, where I gathered a bunch of people, it was 12 different people, including myself, their stories, and it was literally called His Story. And it's so funny now because I put it aside because there was a lot of abuse and negative things, and legally, those people would have had to get permission from their abuser to name them and different things. And it was just like too much for me to handle. And I put it aside and did something else. But all these years later, I realized the other day, it's so funny how you don't see what's right in front of you, that I'm literally doing that now, that I'm
yes,
sharing His story every single week, but just through a podcast. And so I would just encourage you, just keep writing, just keep going, do a little at a time. And before you know it, you'll have the book, and God will provide like He has through the rest of your life. If you
yes.
put that on your heart, it will come to be.
Yeah. And so, with that, and then over time, many people say social media is, I've heard people say social media is not a good thing. And I understand that as far as, people compare themselves.
Mm-hmm.
People only put the highlights out there. And I understand all of that. And it is, I do have children and I watch for that. It can be a scary place if you have children. But I've also seen how God does use it. God can use even um, things that he can use anything.
That's
And
right.
so it's all in how we use it. And so God, through social media, I was connected with Misty, another Misty, and she is, guess what? She's in California near the Los Angeles area. Amazing how God does these things. And
Uh-huh.
she reached out to me, and she founded HopeGateKeepers, and it is a nonprofit organization, as you mentioned, that helps train people on how to look for signs of suicide.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to be certified in and able to go into maybe schools or organizations and train the employers or employees on just how to be more sensitive and watch for signs from people around them who may
That's
be
awesome.
suicidal. And so it's all about having a community that is aware of people and what they're going through, and
Hmm.
and to help them. And so the organization is based on the West Coast, but the Lord, as I said, he does things well. And so I am now in New Jersey, and I have gotten certified, and so I'm slowly, as you said, be still, know that I'm God. I'm being still and
Hmm.
trusting and waiting. I have the desire, and I believe it will be done. And I'm excited about it, but still just trusting. I'm excited to see how the Lord is going to grow that organization here on the East Coast,
Hmm.
um, and blend together. So it's just amazing. And even now I'm talking to you, it's amazing. When my mother had passed, my her final wishes were to be cremated.
Hmm.
She had written it down. She loved the ocean, and her desire was for her ashes to be spread into the ocean. And my
Hmm.
brother had this idea. He said, well, why don't you take half and I'll take half. I'll put my half in the Pacific Ocean and you put your half in the Atlantic Ocean.
Hmm.
And even just in saying that, Hope Gatekeepers, wow, that was due. My part in it is due, obviously, to losing my mom to suicide.
Hmm.
And, Misty is there on the West Coast doing amazing things. She is just doing a great work there and has wonderful team there doing great things. They have Little Seeds of Hope, which helps children as far as suicide.
Hmm.
And I pray one day to grow that here on the East Coast. So if you could pray with me about that.
Absolutely. That's
But
amazing. And I'll be putting everything that you give me as far as links so that people can be taking a look at that in the show notes, as well as your social media links so that they can follow along in what you're doing, so that when your book is done one day, they can get it. And I have one last question for you. It's my favorite question. I always end the podcast with it. If you could go back and give your younger self any advice, what would it be?
I've thought about this since you brought it up. Um, I guess my advice would be just to be still,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and not just physically, the mental.
Mm-hmm.
As I know women, we tend to. I feel, I don't know. I've worked with women. I know it's not all women, but we and with my mom, we internalize things. Even if um, we're constantly working, right? Physically, we're constantly trying to make things happen for people. We're caring for our families, caring for our homes, caring for our jobs, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I have um, done so much in life, like I said, as far as control, and even as a wife and mom now, I'm learning even still to give up the control. My children are growing older and
Yeah.
becoming more independent, and I'm having
Hmm.
to. It's a new season of life,
Yeah.
and so really is just you know, I God always provided before I needed to really worry about it.
Hmm.
But I think the mental and the emotional of being still,
Yeah.
uh, I think is what I would give myself, and not feeling like in my mind always
Hmm.
having to try to figure out how to
Yeah,
um
there's no striving in being still in the faith that God's doing his part, you know. I think a lot of what you're describing is a striving that we end up doing because we are made to be caregivers, and God made us to be the ones that carry the children. And you know, there are things in the way that he has created women that are different, and I think we can let that get out of whack.
yes, I've in thinking about that question, I've seen how I've tried to instill that in my children.
Hmm.
I've told them, don't, when they talk about their futures. My oldest
Hmm.
son now is getting ready to graduate Bible college, and go
Hmm.
into pastoral. And I remember him as a seventh grade little boy at the kitchen table, midnight, everybody else is asleep, and him being in tears. And how is he going to pay for college? How is he going to, you know? And I remember, and he is an old soul, and I remember telling him, it's going to be okay. Where God
Yeah.
leads, He's going to provide. And you know what? I
Hmm.
mean, God has provided for him, through paying for his college, with giving him his first car in so many
Hmm.
ways. And so I think the advice I would give myself is the same advice I'm finding I'm giving my children now. You know,
Hmm.
God is going to take care of you, and He's going to get you where He wants you, because where He's calling you, my pastor says He doesn't call the equipped, He equips the called.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Thank goodness for that, because I had
yes.
no idea what I was doing when I started this or any other big project he gave.
And
Yeah.
so with that, we are here because God gave us life,
That's
and
right.
He is not going to, even if you're in a season of suffering,
Hmm.
He's gonna. My pastor also says that, Psalms 23, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you're walking through it. He's going to get you through it.
Hmm.
So He doesn't make mistakes, and He doesn't need our help.
No, and I mean, we look at Psalm 23, it continues on, you know, it talks about the things he equips you with, your rod and your staff, they're comforting you. He prepares this table in the midst of your enemies, in the midst of that difficulty. He provides for you a place to sit down and eat and fellowship with him. You know, like they're every part of it, the still waters that are provided. I remember, this is so weird, it's popping in my head, but I remember studying Psalm 23 through a book that someone had written, and I'm so sorry I can't remember who it was, but they were talking about the still water, and it really stuck out to me because I pictured like a lake or like a puddle, or, you know, I didn't know what still water was. The still water was the water where it was safe, that the shepherd knew it was safe to take the sheep to drink from, because they were drinking from water that was coming down from the mountain, and a lot of times they were drinking out of a gully, and that would be fine unless a whole bunch of things were melting up there and were going to rush down, and then the water would take them off of their feet, and they could actually even drown in such a little amount of water and die. And so that the shepherd knew where the still water was, where it wasn't ever going to do that, where it was going to be a place to drink and be safe and be at peace. And so I'm sure God is the one that just dropped that into my mind. um, you know, what you're talking about is that same peace that didn't make sense when your first husband was ill, the same peace that didn't make sense that God gave you right before you lost your mom. It's the same peace you wanted to give your younger brothers as a child yourself.
Right.
And it's
Right.
a beautiful thread.
Yes. So one verse I did want to share before we
Hmm.
finish up, and it goes straight along with it all, is a verse that God gave me when I was dealing with the bad anxiety. And in reading this verse I shared with you before, once I read this verse, God lifted that anxiety from me, and
Mm-hmm.
it's something I can never explain, but he did that for me. And it's in Second Chronicles 20, verse 17. Ye shall not need to fight in this battle. Set yourselves, stand ye still, and see the salvation of the Lord with you.
Mm-hmm.
And within the other scriptures surrounding that, it talks about praising the Lord through the battle. And
Mm-hmm.
so the word still there again,
Mm-hmm.
be still, praise him. The battle, we're in this world, and it's a constant battle, but
Yeah.
we know the Lord, and we can experience that stillness with him, and praise him through all of it, and
Yeah.
let him fight for us.
Ah, what a great way to end. That's beautiful. And he put the worshipers out in front of the people that were going to
Yes.
fight, That's what's so great about that. We need to stop worrying about things and just worship God. You don't think about problems when you're worshiping God, right?
Yeah,
And
definitely.
let him do the fighting. That's amazing. Well, obviously, because we've been talking for a while, I could probably talk to you for a couple more hours. But in light of being aware of my listeners' time, I just want to thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm so glad to have you in my life and to be able to pray for all the great things God's continuing to do through you. I can't wait to see what he does next.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a blessing to be a part of this.
It was wonderful for me as well, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, you too.
Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least one good thing, one thing to be thankful for. If you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day, and go be grateful.